Welcome back to another episode, everybody. And I'm very excited to have today's guest. Today's guest is Mike Corey. Now, I came across you, Mike. I'm thinking of the podcast that I saw you on, Mark Devine, on his podcast, as I was looking up. We're both military guys, him and I. Of course, he has a lot more experience than me, but still, I like to go to his page and check out what he's got going on as far as guests. And I came across you. I was like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. What he does, he travels the world. He's like an adventure travel TV host. And also he's kind of like this guy that enables people to see that there's a lot more past your fears. And on the other side of your fears is the person that you've always wanted to become. Wow, I really need to get this guy on the show. So here you are, Mike. I appreciate you being here. For those of you that don't know, he is an adventure travel TV host. So you go to his YouTube, over 350,000 subscribers watching you unveil some of the coolest things that there are throughout the world, which is awesome. But also now being influential in terms of helping people see that there is another world that they can step into if they're willing to face their fears. So, Mike, thank you for joining us. And I would just like you to start off by explaining a little bit what we were talking about prior to the podcast starting. And that's, who was Mike growing up? And then what the heck and how the hell did you end up doing what you do today?
Yeah, well, that's a great place to start. And I guess one thing they always tell you is you should always be what you wanted to be when you were a kid, right? And when I was a kid, I just wanted to be curious. I hear all these stories from my parents growing up where I was a hassle to take on a walk around the block because every single stone, rock, log, I would flip it over and look for salamanders and snakes and spiders and all these different animals because I thought they were really cool and no one else did. And it was my childhood passion to find these things and show my brothers and sisters and my parents and whoever else was around how cool these animals are, these misunderstood animals and creatures. And then there was a bit of a winding road for 20 years or so. And then here I am today, doing exactly the same thing, by the way, just not as often with rocks and stones. Now it's mostly countries. So I go find these strange, unique places, Turkmenistan, Venezuela, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, wherever it is. And from there, show people, hey, it's maybe not exactly what you think. A lot of the world's misunderstood. And my goal is to help people understand it a little bit differently.
So just to be clear here, so if I were to try to define what you do as a profession, how would I do that? Because it's like I said, it's unique and hard to wrap my head around sometimes because there's not too many people that are doing something like this.
Yeah, well, it's a few things. It's a little bit of stoicism. I really enjoy challenging myself. For me, the message has always been about fear. And my online alias is Fearless and Far. And that's not because I'm fearless at all, by the way. It's a common misconception that people can become fearless. I don't think that's true. I just learned how to walk with it, how to dance with it, how to hold its hand and do tango. I might step on its toes once in a while, or her toes. Let's call her her. And but we get along. And from there, from learning how to do that, my life did a complete 180. I was the most phobic person of public speaking, and people never believe me when I say that because of, I guess, my skill set now. And I always just shrug and laugh because I used to be blackout terrified, honestly, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and now it's my full-time career. And that only came from head charging fear with shaking hands and a beating heart and tackling it. And then from there, I can recite 1,000 quotes about how everything you ever wanted in your life is on the other side of fear. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. All these different quotes. It's not a new idea, but I'm a living example of the idea. So I do go to some strange places. I do challenge myself a lot, but the base premise here is fear, conquering fear, understanding the things we fear, and also learning that if we do uncover these things we do fear, if we chase them, if we dive into them, that everything you've ever wanted in your life is on the other side of that feeling. The problem is, it sucks. It sucks to feel fear. It's horrible. We are hardwired to run away from this feeling. And of course, there's things you should run away from, like don't jump off a bridge after listening to this podcast, please. But we all know deep down which ones to listen to, right? Like, if you use your common sense. And a lot of the time, it's just misunderstood. You hear a piece of news about Bangladesh, or all this, I think we just get poisoned very easily. We get infected with other people's fears via advice or media, and then we make ill-informed decisions sometimes, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, that is so cool, and there's so much to dive into right there on this the topic of fear and becoming quote unquote fearless and what that actually means. But I want to touch on something that you said a little bit in your introduction, and that was the fact that as a kid you had this dream and this idea, or what you loved to do was play with rocks, play with nature, be one with all the animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then coincidentally, here you are X number of years later, and you're living that out just in a little bit of a different way, but still doing what you're really passionate about. Now, what I think is unique about that is I believe that as we grow up, the world, the society, culture tries to disable us or discourage us from living out our childhood dreams, because it's just looked at as being unrealistic, or it's just not what the quote unquote average man or woman does. An average man or woman goes to high school, goes to college, goes and get a 9 to 5 job, and then I don't know, 40 years later, 50 years later, it's their time to go, and then now someone else steps into that role.
Mhm.
So how were you able to navigate the waters of modern society and modern culture and not fall into the trap of just becoming, a, a corporate slave, which a lot of people, I believe, are, and just live your life true to who you are instead of living a life to who others want you to become?
Oh, dude, I was in the trap. I was waist deep in the trap, and but it's hard to know what the symptoms are besides just like a lackluster feeling about life. The thing is, you grow up in the Western world, in the Americas, wherever you're from, in these more modern societies, and it's like society has a plan for you. There's already like a path, like success equals go to school, graduate, go to college, graduate, find a boyfriend, find a girlfriend, get married, get a car, get a dog, then have a kid, and then have a second kid, and then they have kids, and then oh my god, you're a success, and that makes some people happy. But for me, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel excited about it. I was a C+ student. I did go to university, took an extra year, failed some courses. I just was always so confused why I did biology in the same vein as my childhood, right? I was always so confused why we were learning about trees when we could see trees outside. Like, let's just go the hell outside and like touch stuff, That's how I grew up. I loved that. And that's how I learned. But I didn't do well that system, and I thought I was dumb. I didn't have good self-confidence. I thought I couldn't apply myself. No, it's just because a lot of profs are bad. Not all of them. I had some good ones. A good phycology prof, which is the study of seaweed, made me love seaweed. And it's amazing what a good professor or teacher can do, right? They can make you love something or hate something, all based on their engagement and their enthusiasm. And especially in the sciences, man. Like, I had a physics teacher in grade 10, and we used to like make little like catapults with levers, and measure the trajectories and swing magnets around, and it was amazing. And everyone did well, and we were all so smart, and we got to see it. And the next year we had a different professor where we just like learned with chalk, and I got like a D, man, because that's not how I learned. So I never really felt like I fit in. But coming from a small town, so I live right above, well, I don't really live anywhere right now, but I'm from right above Maine, basically in the States, in New Brunswick, Canada. It's a small place, like, and I'm from a small town here. And so I didn't speak to any travelers. No one travels here, really. Maybe to go to Cancun, but also like travelers, if you're a traveler, you're obviously not hanging out in your hometown at the local bar, right? You're out traveling, but there's no people whose lives, from when you're in a small town, because they leave, and so you're just surrounded by people who have chosen or have been sucked into, or maybe they're happy, maybe they're not, but living in this bubble. And they're not necessarily going to be the ones to tell you to go start that business or travel to Madagascar, right? So I guess, getting around to the point of it, I didn't fit in, and what it took was a kid. Um, there was a breakup, there was a car crash, there was a grandparent who died, and I just felt lost, man. And then there was a poster on the wall that said, "Hey, are you a recent graduate?" And I was. "Do you want to come to Indonesia and help scientists with their research?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I do." But I couldn't go by myself because that's like super scary, right? And a friend of myself and a friend saved. He bailed last minute after I paid the deposit. I still got on the plane. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die out here. I don't even know what they speak. And then I was kind of forced into my first solo trip, and then fell head over heels in love with travel. And then spent the next 5, 6 years finding myself, really. Someone asked me once what I was looking for, and I couldn't, like, I want to see animals, but I was really looking for myself, because when I was thrown off and I was on an island with no running water, no mirrors, we had to like fish mosquito larvae out of our baths. I felt like at home a little bit. I just felt comfortable with all that bullshit stripped aside, like gelled hair and fakeness. It was just real people doing real things in nature, and I knew a lot about nature, so I like had this glimpse of like kind of like being cool a little bit. Anyway, and so I realized that, oh, maybe I do fit in. I just didn't fit in there, and so I would bounce around trying to find the pieces of me and also the pieces of the world to kind of build my own lens to see everything a bit differently.
Yeah, that is very interesting what you said, that it was a journey of really self-discovery those initial 5 years, or however long it exactly was. But the point I want to get at that you said, I think, was really crucial there, was that seemingly when everything was stripped away as far as the tangibles, right? Because I feel like a lot of us, when we think we need to develop in a certain area, or we want to find a passion, we want to discover who we are quick to buy another book, or we're quick to buy another course, we're quick to listen to another YouTube video. But what I think that what you said is interesting is that it was the simplicity behind everything that you were surrounded by. It was the fact that it was really nothing else. No, it doesn't seem like much technology was involved. Instead, it was just you, yourself, and other people living out in a simplistic world where you had to really rely on yourself and the person next to you. But it wasn't like you had all of these other things to rely on in terms of trying to find yourself. And the point is that I had this conversation with somebody else, that in order to really find yourself, you kind of have to strip everything else away and get to the core, instead of adding things on and really just trying to fill the internal void with external BS. So I'm curious as to what was the power of living a simple life then, and kind of having everything stripped away, like we were saying. How did that enable you to get to the core of who you are as a person, or the core of your identity?
Yeah, now that I think about it here with you, part of the beauty of going to this extremely remote place, I was there for like 3 months, and like I said, basically all they did have beer though once in a while, so not all the pleasures were stripped away, but most of them, like hot water and and not getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. Um, I think what happened is exactly that, right? Like it just smashed my mold, smashed the routines and habits. I could not have any of the same routines and habits I could back here in Canada. There was everything was different, right? My day to day was different. There was no commute anymore. There was no, I mean, I didn't know anybody. There was no watching Netflix or whatever it was then, YouTube, I guess. There was no barely any. There was intranet, which was like you have to type an email, they keep it, and then every Monday morning they would send it out like it's actual real mail. So it was completely disconnected. And because I smashed all the routines, and we're such creatures of habit. I think the default programming for a human is to just conserve energy. That's why, you know, foresight and working out and planning and saving money, all these things it takes a bit of push to be able to see the benefits, because we're just default programming is to conserve energy. And therefore we fall into habits and we go on autopilot really easy. Like you can drive home and kind of forget half the drive because everything's just locked in, conserving this energy. Or you can open the fridge, or you just open your phone and everything's just automatic because your brain just kind of takes out all the thinking. But what happens is, even if you start you watch an inspirational YouTube video or you read a book, these things can help, but all of the framework holding you back is still there. Like the bars are still on the cage. You may have bent a couple, but it's really hard to break them. Your mind doesn't want to break them, but it does break them? Travel. When you actually physically leave the location to some place, especially if they don't speak the language, and everything's different. And what I realized is then it's really easy to form new habits when everything around you changes. If you're used to going to bed and watching 30 minutes of YouTube videos before bed, and it's a bad habit. It just, you feel like it's like junk food craving. You feel like you need it even if you don't. It becomes a habit. But you change locations and you're in a new bed somewhere else or sleeping in a hammock, it's gone because everything else has changed and your body isn't anticipating this normal action. And that's another thing about it too, is I saw myself change in those months. And every time I traveled, I could kind of press the reset button and then reconfigure new habits, add new things, take things away. And it was always this like soft reset on myself. And I think that's what got me hooked in travel, because I could add things, I could change things. And I knew that if I stayed in one spot too long, like in my hometown, then all of these bad habits kind of start creeping the tentacles in again.
Yeah. So then I'm curious also as to all of this travel that you were doing and and specifically in this first place, because this is really the start of everything and the day-to-day that you live now. What would you tell somebody, and what are the experiences or the concrete things that you took away from the experience that you would tell somebody that is looking to kind of discover who they are as a person? They're stuck in the routine of their 9-to-5 job. They're a student maybe who's just going to school just to please somebody else, or just they think that's what they have to do. And they don't have a real understanding of how to fill up their inside world, their internal world. The water bottle I'm holding, they get things, magnetize things that only touch the surface area or the things on the outside, but they're not filling up the actual bottle. So how does one go about filling up that bottle, in your opinion?
Well, for me, it was travel. And again, I got obsessed with travel because of my childhood, which was explaining misunderstood things to people. And when I traveled from here all the way to the other side of the world to do this Indonesia thing, my family was supportive, but I have friends that were like, my family was scared too, actually. It was their oldest child going to some place that no one knew the name of, really. They couldn't pronounce it. And I was scared too, but I got there and everything was so perfectly fine. It was the best. It was a highlight of my entire life, because I went there so scared of this faraway place with no information about it. And there was a typhoon there. There was like the terrorist act, like, I don't know, years and years before, not exactly there, but in the country. And then you realize, you go to these places and you're like, oh, this is nothing like I thought. And all of this information I read is not factual at all. It's written by people who've never been here. I mean, there's places to worry about, but it's like, for example, if someone gets shot in Seattle, are you still going to go to Florida? Yeah, probably, because they're really freaking far apart. But for some reason, when we think about countries, we think about it differently. Like if someone gets shot in Indonesia, we're like, Indonesia's dangerous, even though there's like as many people there as there is in the States, give or take, but like a lot, and it's huge. So what I think in these places, we only hear one or two data points, and usually negative news is what we click on. And so we only ever hear these negative things. So hear one negative data point about something happening in a country, and that just stays with us for decades, right? Anyway, so for me, it was realizing that a lot of the stuff that I was learning about the world was not true at all. And then I started asking a lot of questions like, well, if that's not true, then what about other things like bungee jumping and skydiving? And so that's where I got this challenge myself idea where, okay, let's investigate some things and see if they're actually as dangerous as they seem to be. And 8 times out of 10, they're not. And then you go do something and you study first and take the training, if it's scuba diving or skydiving, and you approach it cautiously with like you're someone holding your hand or whatever it is, metaphorically. And you can do some amazing things on this planet, man. And then you get the courage to do all kinds of things. So if you can do a bungee jump, then you can ask that girl on a date. You can ask for promotion. Once you start bullying fear back, then it stops being so powerful in your life. You have to fight back against it, or else it's always just going to rule you. And so for me, and this travel thing, I'm just understanding and gaining the independence and the flexibility and the resourcefulness of planning that first trip was the most powerful thing that ever happened. And then the whole world opened up to me, literally, but also metaphorically, in the sense that I was able to craft an entire dream life, doing something that I was absolutely terrified to do, that I was not a natural at all. And that was from travel. And what people think is traveling is this complicated thing. And if I go to pick a country, I don't know, like Romania, like what am I going to do there? It's so far away. Or like even like rural Mexico. they still use Uber and they still use Airbnb, and you still book on Expedia. You can use all these, this easier now than ever. You have a phone with all of the maps in your pocket all of the time. You can go anywhere in the world now, man, using a lot of the same tools. And most places speak English. English is like the currency language of the world. You have to push to find someone who doesn't speak English these days. And coming from someone who's been to 70, 80 countries, a lot of them ones that people have told me not to go, who have never been there. That some would call even dangerous at times. And doing this for 10 years, I can barely count the circumstances of bad, dangerous things happening to me. Like, people are good, people are kind, as despite what everyone reads and hears, people are not out to get you. It's, the world's a kind, beautiful place. And you have the opposite so much sometimes that it's inconvenient. I went to Mauritania in West Africa. It's like considered a dangerous country to go to because something happened there half a decade ago or something. But nothing since. And it was people who were, maybe not doing the best things, but either way. And we were asked to come into tea 4 times a day. Every day we were there. People were like lining up and like scheduling us to go have tea with them and their family. And tea takes half an hour because they pour it back and forth and it makes this big frothy head, and you have to have 3 and you have to talk about everything. So we're spending like an hour or 2 a day just doing tea with people because everyone is just so excited to see us. Anyway, getting back to it, traveling is the best thing anybody can ever do to get unstuck. That and understanding their fears and not heeding the advice, using them as guidelines, but they go hand in hand. People are scared to travel because they don't have the right information. Talk to someone who does. If you have a friend from high school or university or your buddy's wife's husband or something, buddy's wife, anyway, talk to that person, invite them for a beer, and hear from a real traveler who's seen the world about really what it's like. Every single solo traveler will say, it's the best thing I ever done. Anyone who hasn't solo traveled will say, don't do it, it's dangerous. I mean, who do you listen to? Unfortunately, it's usually the person who's never done it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the fact that the possibilities that are on the other side of developing a flexible mindset, as opposed to having a rigid mindset of don't go there because it is really dangerous or it's a bad place to go. But when you open up, or how I like to say it is, if I give you a new pair of glasses and you put on those glasses instead of the glasses you've been wearing, now you see something that's completely new. And once you're willing to actually do that, that's when you start to learn more, experience more, become more. And one question that I wanted to ask you, and this goes back to my own experience because I haven't been to many places around the world. I went to Morocco, I went to Italy, but for you, you have a lot bigger of a perspective. Now, I'm curious as to how did learning more about other people and other cultures help you learn more about yourself?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing was realizing that everything we do here isn't necessarily the best way. Like we assume that America, Canada, same. So, and if everything we do here is like normal and the best, so like maybe being Christian, maybe eating bacon, like these are things that not the whole world does, but we think is like the best way. Then you realize when you go over to like India and there's like 1 billion people there and no one eats beef, that you're like, oh, well, there's more people here that don't than in USA or Canada combined. Like which one's right or wrong? You know what I mean? If you're going by pure numbers, then we don't stand much of a chance. People think like there's people, I forget what country I was in, that thought peanut butter was disgusting. And I was like, how can you think it? And they're like, oh, but then you go to Australia and they like Vegemite and Marmite, which is that fermented yeast. And that, I think that's disgusting. But so you just realize that not everything you think is right and true and the best way might not be the actual any of those. It's a way, I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's just another way. And then once you understand that and you see people living very happy lives, eating different things, worshiping different gods, speaking different languages, you start seeing some things that fit you better than other things, and other things you like and you don't like. And from there, you can piece yourself together like a bit like a Frankenstein monster. Every trip you take, I'm sure even like Morocco is still a pretty wild place, man. It's Islamic. You get to see a bit of what that world's like. And it's actually really misunderstood too. some of the moments I've had interacting with Muslims have been so like heartfelt and beautiful, where they'll shake your hand, they'll touch their heart, they'll invite you into their house, and you hear the call to prayer, and it's really a beautiful thing sometimes, right? It just gets misrepresented a lot too. Um, but you take pieces of all that and it forms your future. And just the flexibility and resourcefulness is one of the best skills you can have, because life's a bitch, man. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when it comes and roundhouse you with a big combat boot. Like, it happens to everybody. You can stay in your house your entire life and be scared of taking risks, and risks unavoidable. It's going to come knocking. Something's going to happen. It's going to be your health or something. Like, there's no safety from risk and suffering in our lives, unfortunately. The only bulletproofness you can do is by preparing in advance and putting yourself through little hells on purpose. So when the big hells come crashing down, you're stronger and you're ready. You've got the armor plating from some voluntary, it could be just sleeping in the woods for a few nights when it's cold. It could be taking a solo trip. It could be all these different things, or it could be laying down in a restaurant for a second. I don't know, like on the floor. But like, these things don't hurt you, but they like make you more flexible and more, weathered to the ups and downs. And that's one of the best things in the world, because it's dangerous to get dismantled, especially if being in the military or any extreme circumstance. Scuba diving, warfare, a stressed out panic attack kills people. In all of these things, all of these dangerous situations, could be car crashes, could be a burning house. If you panic and lose control, that's how people die, right? That's real facts. If you can be like, oh, okay, this is shitty, but you've put yourself through enough similar things, you have a little bit more grasp. That's how you can save your life, your family's life, someone else's life, a pet's life, or at least make it a lot less crappy of an outcome in the end. And that's what I got addicted to, is finding these experiences. They don't have to be crazy. Again, just showing up in a place like Morocco or Italy, and just decide, like, you know what, I'm gonna travel along the coast myself. I'll take some buses, maybe I'll, to meet some friends. Even that, like, fosters independence and resourcefulness. And you just, yeah, these are all things that I think are very healthy to develop. And travel is the best way to do that, in my opinion, because you never really know exactly where you're going to end up. And sometimes those are the best stories. Often those are the best stories.
Yeah, Mike, there's a good story, a good fable. I forgot exactly what they call it, but going back to stoicism, I know that you consider yourself a bit of a stoic. But I forgot if it was by Epictetus or who it was, but there was a good story fable that goes something along of the lines of this. So there was a boar and a fox. Have you ever heard of this one?
I think so, but continue.
So the fox was sitting in the woods, and he notices out in the distance that there is a boar sharpening his tusks against a tree. And Fox is thinking, what the heck is this boar doing? So he turns to the boar and says, boar, why are you sharpening your tusks? You're only supposed to do that when danger is present, or danger is near. And then the boar turns to him and says, Fox, when danger does present itself, there will be no time to sharpen my tusks then. So I can only sharpen them now. So and when I heard that, I was like, holy moly, that speaks so beautifully to life. Like, exactly what you were saying. It's inevitable that something is going to hit us in life that we just don't expect. But if we just try to build the mental resiliency or fortitude in that moment, it's never going to work, because we haven't, exactly like you said, or just like the boar, we haven't sharpened our tusks or sharpened our minds, in our case, to deal with something of that sort. So I appreciate you saying that, because that is something that does not get talked about enough. And it's the voluntary, quote unquote, suffering. But like I think you alluded to it. What about sleeping on your floor for a couple of days instead of sleeping on your bed? That'll do something to you.
For real. Yeah, for real.
And it's just, if more of us got in this mindset, but going back again, I keep saying this, going back to what you said, because you're making so many key points. Our brains are hardwired to stay away from danger. It goes back to our primal brain, because that's what kept us alive. So then, bouncing off of that and the danger sense in our brain, now talk to me about your online alias, about being fearless and facing your fears, because I know you weren't always that guy. So how were you able to, because you've already touched on it a little bit, but how were you able to turn fears into strengths that now you use to influence and help develop other people? So basically, what is your message on fear, and how do you, or what's the process of you teaching this to other people?
Right. So I guess the what Fearless and Far is a brand or myself, and I try to help people chase their fears so they can travel the world. But I don't have to travel. They don't have to. But the fear chasing is mandatory. And yeah, again, it's so easy to think that maybe it was like, oh, one day I'm going to change, but it wasn't that. It was getting kind of tricked, like I said, to take that first trip, and I only did that because life kicked me in the nuts a few times. And then something similar happened again after I'd been traveling for a while to start making videos, because to me, traveling didn't solve it exactly, but it did kind of like put me on the trail of, okay, maybe I need to start investigating these things I'm really scared of more, because most of the things I had been scared of didn't make sense after I learned more about them. And so basically there was another circumstance. I was I was doing a dive master certification in Honduras, and it was kind of an island called Utila, and it was like paradise there. You didn't have to wear shoes, and I didn't for a couple months, which bit me in the ass in the end, because I kicked a table and bent the toenail back, and then as I was leaving, and that's actually when I went to Georgia. So I stopped off in Georgia on the way back to go to the aquarium and do a breakdance competition, because I was kind of breakdancing at the time. And then met my family in Canada, and we went skiing for a week, actually in Vermont. We went down from Canada. So basically got all sweaty, then went to ski and kept this like busted toe in a ski boot for a week. Anyway, the toe melted, flesh-eating disease and MRSA, and it put me on a couch for 4 months, and I couldn't walk because it was so painful. Almost had to have it snipped. None of the antibiotics worked. It was a zombie toe. It was horrendous. And in that moment of pain and suffering again, a friend messaged me. He's like, "Yo, man, you should make a video for this travel competition. You'd like to travel." And I was like, "Yeah, man, but I don't make videos, so that's ridiculous." He goes, "Oh, well, what are you gonna do? Sit on the couch for 4 more months?" Duh. And I was like, oh fuck. So again, at that point where I was just, suffering a little bit, I decided to do something crazy. I'm like, listen, we're here, we got time. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you go? And I remember going to the parking lot to a class called Toastmasters, which is like an international public speaking group kind of thing. And like, I almost didn't go inside. I was there in the parking lot, and I was trying to rationalize all these reasons why I shouldn't go. And, but like, no, like, why not? There's absolutely no good reason not to. But I was making up reasons, and that's something we're really good at. We're all good at rationalizing why we have to start Monday, or 2020, screw 2020, 2021 is going to be better. This whole attitude of like not starting now, starting later because no, it's all bullshit. You can start right now. There's no reason why you can't do it literally right now. All those reasons are bullshit you're telling yourself. And so I had this like war, and I remember going in, and I didn't know this, and I definitely wouldn't have gone in if I knew it, but you have to give a presentation to the group on your first day of public speaking class. So I'm there doing a presentation in front of, there's like 10 people. And every time you say or like, they click it so you can keep track of these crutch words. So every time you go, everyone does them. But there was a guy with a clicker, and every time I went, he'd click it. So I go, hi, click. My name is click. And anyway, made it through. I lived. Surprisingly, I felt like it was really dangerous. It felt horrible, but I lived. And then went to a second class and third class, and eventually made the video for the competition, and did like 900 takes to say my name. One of them worked, and then did like 500 to say the second thing. Anyway, put it all together, and there was a video that no one knew how many takes I had to do to get my name right. And then fast forward, I guess 10 years of hobbling stuff together, and that's my job now. And so it was from life hitting me again. But if I was born with one talent, it would be for identifying insects and arachnids. And the second talent would be just being able to be up against the fence and realize that I'm not out, and realize that there is an opportunity somewhere hidden in all this mess. So if I feel like life is just being unfair, and that there's no way out. And there's some default switch in my head that flicks and is like, there's something you can gain from this. Just look for it. And that's the attitude that's gotten me to be where I am today. And I'm not just some nervous wreck still living in my mom's basement, which is what definitely the path that I was on.
Right, right. So then what is your concept of gratitude? Because I mean, doing what you do and experiencing all of these different things. I know that for example, you travel to a Buddhist country. I mean, they have some practices that I've read about that are deeply internal, that deeply have you reflect on what you're grateful for, what's going right in your life instead of what's going wrong in your life. So I'm curious as to, or what are your gratitude practices, or what role does gratitude play in your life in terms of how does it enable you to stay on a course that is positive, that is empowering, instead of living a life trapped in your past that is disempowering? Because I was doing an exercise with somebody and they couldn't find anything to be grateful for in the past, but they didn't. There was just so many things to be grateful for, but they couldn't see it because of the mental block that they had, because they were just the past is so bad, the past is so bad. And I feel like so many people run away from the past instead of running towards what they actually want and who they become. So how has gratitude enabled you to give you some tools, whether those probably be internal tools that help you just be a more competent, confident person, instead of being someone that's just trying to run away from not being the public speaker you were in the past?
Well, man, it's been massive, but we're doing a video right now actually to make this a bit easier. Does it say grateful on your wall behind you?
Yeah, I try. You see, there's hooks on one side, not the other, unfortunately, so I can't flip it. But yes,
I should
yes.
ask you this question. No, but dude, as if you have it on your wall, you know it is a magic. It's a magic spell. It's the solution. It's the key. It is the enchantment that fixes everything in our life. And I guess for me the most prominent example in the beginning was going back to fear for a second, being able to use this magic word to fight the fear in my life. Because you can't be thankful, you can't be grateful and angry, you can't be grateful and scared, can't be grateful and annoyed. Like, it is the antidote to all these poisonous snake bites that afflict us with these horrible sicknesses, right? And for me, in the beginning, and even, dude, even still now, whenever I get scared, and I do get scared, I'm not actually fearless, I say, yes, thank you. And it short-circuited my brain in the beginning, because even now I'll go do like a big speaking circuit. Like, I did a 7-country speaking circuit last year in front of thousands of people. And of course I get nervous. Like, don't get rid of this feeling. Like, if you have something traumatic happen to you as a kid, like I did with this public speaking thing, or it could be snakes, or it could be whatever it is in your life, it sticks with you. You just kind of have to learn to deal with it. And so you get up there, or you counter that thing, and I would say, yes, thank you, to the fear. And then your brain goes like, wait, what? And it just doesn't understand, like, that the appreciation that this horrible feeling's there is the first step to being able to get rid of it. And that's anything. It could be jealousy, could be whatever it is. That word and that feeling is the solution to it all. And if you can convince yourself that it's good that this thing happened, or this thing is occurring right now, it completely shuts down the system. It's infiltrating it on the deepest level, and freaking with the wires, man. And yeah, you can change your life with that simple attitude right there. So yeah, no, it's everything.
Yeah, it just interrupts the pattern that we're normally used to continuously running. And that's so true. The fact that the fears don't go away. You just learn to make them either work for you, or you keep them in a state where it doesn't disempower you, which I that's why I love what you're doing, is that you've been able to turn. It's crazy, isn't it, to think? Do you ever think sometimes of how crazy it is that you showed up for your first Toastmasters, where you were I probably would say scared to present in front of 10 or a dozen people, and then here you are now traveling to 7 different countries, you know?
I like I yeah, like I said, it's uh, I feel like I have a gift to share or a secret to share. I just want people to believe me when I say that this can happen. We were also talking a bit earlier, before we started recording, that one of the biggest problems is people assume that the people they see on screens or on podcasts or movies are like a level above what they can be. But that's not true at all. It's just that a lot of these people had something happen in their life. It could have been the circumstance they were born into, but that's usually not always the case. Usually it's an ordinary person who had some riveting, earth-shaking, foundation-cracking event, and they're like, I'm gonna head this way out of desperation. And then we see them as these perfect, flawless beings who have always been that way, but we don't ever talk about the messy start, or we do, or people just don't believe us or something, right? But it's really important to understand that all it takes is just you deciding to be different. And it's not that easy, believe me. We spoke about it. It usually takes an event to shake everything up, to change your habits, your systems, but it's really important.
And it's a choice, as you're saying. It comes down to a choice, and we can choose right now to stop running away from our fears and start running towards what we actually do want. And that, to me, is the contribution that you're making. And this leads to my last question: would be, if you had us to think about your legacy, when you think about your life, big picture, the contribution that you want to make, the love that you want to leave behind, the people that are closest to you, how you're touching them. What does your legacy look like as you think of when you're there at your 80th birthday party, your 85th birthday party, and everyone you love and everyone, all your colleagues and everybody who's helped you get where you are, everyone's around you. Now, what do you envision them saying about you, the contribution that you made to them? Just what is the legacy that you hope to leave behind?
Well, I just want people to get on board with this idea that we don't have to fear fear. Ultimately, I mean, I feel fortunate to have helped. I don't know how many people now, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know. They don't all message me, but a lot do. And that in itself, like, for example, there was a girl who messaged me just yesterday, and she was like, for years I was talking about how I wanted to go skydiving, but I was, a little bit too heavy, I thought. And also that I just didn't think it was the right time. I needed to get a little more money. And then one day I saw you made a post about just doing it, and I just booked it. I took the phone and I booked the skydiving for 2 days from now. So I couldn't even think about it. And I went, and it was the best thing that I ever did. And like, that's made me like almost cry, man, because that's what I want. Because we just tell ourselves so much bullshit, and that's just fear. The puppeteer with the strings, it loves that shit. And I just want people to take the scissors and snip them and just grab life by the horns and not get bullied and bossed around by this feeling. And for me, I had a bit of a bumpy path, and I don't recommend everyone does what I do. You don't have to go to the same countries. You don't have to do the same experiences. Actually, I probably recommend that you don't. But I want to be the guinea pig to show people that a recovering scaredy cat can learn about things, do things, and hopefully help you just dealing with the feeling itself. That's what I want. And I've had success doing that, but I want to go bigger and bigger and bigger and help the world. Because at least for me, growing up in a small town like this, it's beautiful here, but I didn't have someone to kind of help me along this path. I've got some great role models in my life, but no one specifically there. And that was the thing that I needed. So I want to be that for people. And I did have people like Tim Ferriss and Chris Guillebeau and Ryan Holiday, all these other people, as digital mentors. I don't actually know these guys, but come in and me digest their content and kind of help me find myself. And I'm doing the same. I would love to do the same to the entire world to help them navigate fear better, because it's the number one thing that holds us all back. If you feel stuck in life, I guarantee there's a fear in there manipulating you and holding you back. It's always in there somewhere.
Yeah, I relate it back to when I went to Army Airborne School, where you jump out of planes, like you're alluding to. And I'll never forget, you do 5 jumps. You do how many night jumps? You do 3 jumps or 2 jumps at night, 3 during the day. But I'll never forget the very first jump. We were going up in the plane, and these planes are very loud. They're not luxury planes. So you hear it going up, and this was the first time that I ever had been up in heights this much. And yeah, I go on roller coasters but like thousands and like 1,000+ feet up. Yeah, that's pretty high. But I'll never forget. There's a whole procedure you have to run through in order to make sure you're doing it safely while you're on the plane. And one of the things that they say is hook up. So you take this carabiner that you have to unclip from your whole chest area, which has more gear on it. And I'll never forget, I was shaking like a leaf, like a leaf. I couldn't do it. So I said, Sergeant Middleton, please help me, please help me. Cause I was like 2 steps behind at this point. So he just comes over to me and he fixes me. He turns around and he just laughs because this is something he's seen so many times. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy's laughing at me. But anyways, I was like the 6th guy to go out the plane or whatever, but I went out the plane and I was really, really scared. But then as soon as my parachute opened and I looked around, I was like, holy moly, this is the best thing that I've ever done in my life. But taking that first step and not being stuck in the door, being willing to jump out, man. And by the time the last jump came, which was at night, I was like, I want to go out the door first. Since I got to do it. I got to see what the experience is like. But it was just crazy. The other side of my fear, like we talked about this whole discussion, was just bliss, beauty. But I had to face it. And I thank you for just enabling us and being a light for us to see that fear is not something to be feared of or scared of, but something that we can use to put in our arsenal of personal growth and development. Because there's a lot of personal development and growth books that talk like, how to reframe your past to create a better future, or the meaning of the suffering you're going through, or how to become a better public speaker. But I haven't come across that much that talks about fear itself and what exactly it is, how to touch into it. So I thank you. And for me personally, you are making that impact and that contribution. And that's why I reached out to you, because I love what you do and the message that you're spreading. It's beautiful to see a person that is spreading such positivity. So I just want to say thank you. And from all of the people that are going to listen to this, thank you, because everyone's living in a state of fear and you're helping us one day at a time get out of that state.
Thanks, man. I've been to the dark side, so I want to help people out too.
Well, there we have it, folks. Mike Corey, international traveler, speaker, and just a man that enables us to get that much better.